こんにちは。私の名前はHakon です。今日は20個のひらがなを学びます。Hello, my name is Hakon, and today we are learning 20 hiragana or 20 further hiragana from what we already know. In my last episode, I went through a few of them, and I'll continue where I left off. But first, a little bit of a repetition from my previous episodes. So just to recap a little bit, we have learned so far that Japanese has three distinctive systems of writing, three sets of characters, if you like, known as kanji, katakana, and hiragana. And of course, here are written these words in kanji. And kanji are, in Japanese, literally means Han character. The characters of the Han people, the Han Chinese. And these were the ones that were introduced to Japan and used in Japan for writing when Japanese didn't have its own writing system. And they were later derived to simplified forms of characters in two different systems known as katakana and hiragana. So these, if you see the katakana particularly, they look like they could be elements of the same stylized characters that kanji are. And the hiragana are more cursive, more flowy characters, more akin to how you can imagine that the characters would look when you use a brush to write them. So these two distinct systems were created to be used for syllables that when the characters had a phonological value. The kanji used in Chinese today can either have a meaning content based on the character, or they can have a phonological content. They're only used for the sound of the character. In Japanese, when you see a kanji, more often than not, it is for the meaning content of it. And if you have something that would have been written with a kanji for the sound content in the past, these days in modern Japanese, you are using one of these characters, katakana or hiragana, to denote the sounds. And that actually is one thing that makes Japanese easier to read, because it's very quick to, once you know the characters, to scan the page and actually see what the meaning words are. And then you can see these characters make up the usually the grammatical endings, the particles, and I'm not talking about hiragana now, not katakana. Hiragana makes up the grammatical endings, some of the simpler words, some words that actually are not written in kanji very often because the kanji are obscure as well. And katakana is primarily today used for foreign loanwords that are not from Chinese. Chinese loanwords in Japanese are still written in kanji, and that's also one of the reasons why kanji have several different pronunciations, and we will get back to that when we start on our first kanji very soon. But first, we want to go through the syllabary. And by syllabary, I mean the system of different syllables in Japanese. In traditional Japanese, they talked about the 50 syllables. And indeed, in Japanese, you have roughly 50 basic syllables, and then you have some modifications of them that add to that number. So in Japanese, you have what is, for a language, quite a small number of possible syllables at 104. I did talk about this as well before, so we have, I'll just do them in Latin alphabet now, and or Romaji, as I also said that is known as in Japanese. So we have 5 different possible vowels in Japanese: a, I, u, e, o, and of course with the u, it's unrounded lips. And then you add a consonant in front of them to get the different syllable characters. And so we have ka, ki, ku, ke, ko, sa, shi, su, se, so, ta, chi, tsu, te to, na ni nu ne no, ha he. The he thing. Usually he is more often than not it's not a he sound, a she sound. It's more quite far at the back of the mouth. You can sort of imagine that you're trying to say he, but you are trying to also make it into a sort of a sound at the same time, so it becomes so he. That's in Hyaku 100, Hiragana, you say Hiragana. It's almost like it's sort of in between a sort of a sh sound and a h sound. And then it's fu, and it's not fu as in you would say it in English. It's not a if. It's more like a sort of a breath, a little bit of friction between the lips. Fu. So ha, hi, fu, hu, he, ho, ma, mi, mu, me, mo, ya, you, yo, ra, ri, ru, re, ro, wa, o, n. Now there's another o here, and I explained this previously. This used to be the letter wo, but this is now only used as a particle. And many of the particles being, of course, most of the time single characters that are used to signify what kind of element the word preceding it is in the sentence. So it tells you whether something is a subject, an object, an indirect object, etc. It often tells you something about the same kind of function as prepositions have in English. So it tells you what the sentence element is. You might think of them, if you know any languages that use case, you might think of them as case markers as well. So there could be a genitive particle, for instance. So genitive is a case. Grammatical case is something that is quite alien to someone whose native language is English, and also many other languages, but it is a system by which different grammatical functions affect how a word, very often what kind of endings it gets, sometimes what kind of article it gets, and so you get, and in Japanese, of course, the words themselves are usually not changed. You add onto them things to denote the grammatical function in the sentence, like particles. And in the case of verbs, you also have a huge number of grammatical endings to show different aspects and times, for instance, and other things. So those are the basic characters, and then you can also add some small diacritics to create a further set of characters. So this is, you take the ka line, the K line, and you add a diacritic that looks a bit like a quotation mark. I think it's known as a dakuten. I'll get back to that. So, and then you get ga, gi, gu, ge, go, and you add it to the S line, and you get za, ji, zu. The zu is sometimes pronounced as zu, by the way. Something to be aware of. But zu, we'll go with zu for now. Ze, zo. And you add it to the D line, and you get da, ji, zu again. De, do. And then there's a slightly quirky one, because if you add it to the H line, you get ba, bi, bu, be, bo. And then there's a different diacritic that looks a bit like a degree symbol, a tiny circle. And then to add out together with the H line, you get pa, pi, pu, pe, po. In addition to that, you can have any of the characters from the E line, from the E column, and you add a small version of ya, you, or yo, and you get a further set of characters. And those are kya, kyu, kyo, gya, gu, gyo, sha, shu, sho, ja, ju, jo, cha, chu, cho, ja, ju, jo, nya, nyu, nyo, hya, hya, hyu, hyo, bya, bu, byo, pya, pyu, pyo, rya, ryu, ryo. And we'll get back to all of those when we are actually doing the characters. I'm just showing you all the possible syllables now. But these are all the possible syllables of Japanese In loanwords, however, in loanwords in Japanese, there are some further syllables that are possible, although most of them are not used. That is to say, in Japanese, when you have loanwords, very often they are restricted to the phonology of Japanese, even though further characters, further sounds are possible. And we will get back to that as well. And then we have the characters we have learned so far. So this is from the last episode. We had, of course, a, I, u, e, o. I printed them out today. I got a handwritten version here somewhere as well. And then we have ka, ki, ku, ke, ko. And I hope you practiced these since last time. And then we have ga, gi, gu, ge, go, which is exactly the same as the K line, but with the dakuten, the little diacritic that looks like a quotation mark added on. So today that means the next thing up is for us to do the S line. That's the next thing up. I had a few notes somewhere about things that I wanted to mention after last time. I'll just see if I can find them now. Let's see. Let's see. No, I think I forgot to mention the one. Oh yes, I did talk about the other day. I was talking a little bit about double consonants, not about consonants, about double vowels. I will say more about that when we have the whole syllabary sorted out. There's also a way to make double consonants. So one word that might be familiar to lots of people is matcha, which is green tea powder. And we know that there's a syllable ma in our syllabary, and we know there's a syllable cha. But then you get an extra t there, and that is because in Japanese, when you want to create a double consonant, you have just like you do add a small ya, you, yo to create the kya, kyu, kyo sounds, also known as the glides, I think. You can also use a small tsu symbol. So that's the u character on the T line, the tsu character. So if you write, I'm not going to do the characters now, normal ma plus a small tsu plus a chi plus a small ya. And then the chi and the ya together become cha, and the tsu in front of the chi makes it a double consonant, which adds one mora, which is a length of time and pronunciation. So it becomes matcha. Instead of, if it was just written like that, it would have been matcha, 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 but it's matcha. And I'll get back to all of these things. It will be a little bit, it's a little bit strange and abstract for me to do it in Romaji, in Latin characters. But for now, because we haven't learned the characters, this is how I'm doing it. Now, that's another thing I wanted to talk about. And this is where it shows really well how I'm not doing any scripts when I'm doing these. As indeed I don't do for any of my videos apart from one. Now, the thing is that why am I teaching you Japanese and I still haven't taught you any words really or anything like that? Because I think it is possible to teach someone Japanese using the Latin alphabet. You can do that. You can teach someone to read and write a Latinized Japanese. You can teach them to speak Japanese using the Latin alphabet. But I think that an important part of learning Japanese is, and also one of the interesting things about the language, is to read and write it. So I find that, just indeed exactly like my Japanese teacher also thought, that what you want to start with is actually the characters. And then you move on to learning words and reading. Because the thing is, once you have the characters, every time you every time I teach you a word, I can write it in Japanese, and that becomes a way for you to connect the sounds with what it looks like, and it becomes a lot easier and easier to learn the reading of Japanese as well. So that is also the same system I will go with when I'm doing this course, I suppose. You can call it a course now. More or less structured. So this is not going to be, as I've mentioned before as well, this is not going to be a very well-structured course. Possibly. The thing is, I'm sort of winging it a bit. I'm going through all of this myself for my own sake, and I thought I'd share it with others as well who are interested in learning about Japanese. So this is a little bit like you can imagine, or certainly I'm imagining, it's like I'm sitting here together with you, and we are having a sort of more or less informal chat about how Japanese works, and I'm explaining some things to someone who's actually interested in hearing about it and in learning it. So it doesn't really feel like a sort of a teacher-student situation to me. It's more like an informal chat between friends about language, which is something I love doing, which of course indeed many of my friends would know. So right, now that said, let's move on to the S line. So here we are. Rid of that. So we've done A, I, U, E, O, Ka, Ki, Ku, Ke, Ko, and then we are doing Sa, Shi, not Si, Su, Se, So. And I've got my book out just to be sure I get it right now. So we have Sa, one line like that, and then we go down and around, like so. Well, actually, that's not quite right. Skip that. Okay. We go down, we go like this, and then we don't do the full circle there, so we do it like that. But that's sort of what it's derived from. And of course, in handwriting, if you write it like that, that might still be acceptable. So, she, just a little shape like that. Su, starting with a horizontal line, starting a bit like A and O. And then we do a little orbit there, and we keep going down, and a little sort of hook at the end. There we are. Se, horizontal line, long horizontal line, going down there, and then we go down there. And So is, just to make sure I make it look nice now, different ways of doing this. I usually sort of see it written like so. I've also seen it sort of written more like so, which I suppose is also acceptable. And then, of course, we have if you add the diacritics here, you get za, ji, zu or zu, ze, zo. So, za, ji, zu, ze, zo. Now, sometimes zu is pronounced zu, but it's never written in Latin alphabet as zu. You only write it like that. So those are the characters. And then we also have the T line. So we have ta, chi, tsu, te, to. And just to make sure I get it right now, I'm looking at my thing here, so that we got ta starts with a sort of a cross shape, and then we have almost like a little ko, if you remember the character ko. Ta, and then it is chi, and this is also why we probably shouldn't write the sa in a sort of connected thing, because then it's easier to mix it up with the chi. So ta, chi, tsu, You'll see this looks a bit like a U, but without the line on top. So there's lots of characters that look alike, and sometimes it's confusing because you mix them up, and other times it's actually good because you can remember them by their similarities as well. So remember that Ta is like that character plus a Chi looks a bit like Sa, but it's tilted in a different angle. Tsu is like U without the line on top, things like that. Te, and finally To. Looks a bit like a Y, doesn't it? And again, we have the voiced line here as well when we add the diacritic, the dakten. And then we have da, G again. Ju, isn't it? Yeah. Is it Ju or is it no? Is it no? You don't do that. You call it Zu actually. Yeah. Sorry about that. Because Ju that is the G plus the U character. Sorry about that. So da, Ji, Zu, de, do. I will make mistakes from time to time because I'm human, and also because I'm also a learner, or a relearner in this case. If you notice any mistakes that you know I'm making, please leave a comment, of course. I will try to, if I notice myself that I'm making a mistake, I will try to correct myself as quickly as possible, and sometimes either put a comment on the video if I remember in time, or I will mention it in the next video or a future video. So you're right. So we are doing da, Ji, Zu, or Zu, de, and do. So that is the one. So we got sa, shi, su, se, so, za, ji, zu, ze, zo, ta, chi, tsu, te, to, da, ji, zu, again, de, do. And of course, even though these characters sound exactly the same as the ones up here, they are used differently, of course, because very often when you have the voicing of the character with the diacritic mark, it is because a sound has changed based on its environment. So a character, a word that is written with a sun, for instance, might then get revoiced to zan based on a phonological environment, and so it is also depending on what characters then are changed, you would use the different ones. So was there anything else I wanted to tell you today, I wonder? I'm just trying to think if there was anything else I had plans to do. So I think that's it for now, actually. I think I mentioned the things I wanted to say, and I don't want to make these videos too long. I want them to be a little bit bite-sized. So I will see you in my next episode, and I will talk more about, I will give you a further hiragana to learn next time, and I'll repeat a little bit of what we did this time. I'm not going to do a full repeat like what I did now. And I also, in addition to doing the next hiragana, I will also perhaps talk about some other aspects of Japanese as well. So there's always a little bit of extra information in addition to just the characters. So thanks for watching again. If you enjoyed this, please like, share, comment, subscribe, join me on Patreon, all those things to support what I'm doing. Leave a comment if you have any questions, or if you have any, well, comments, I suppose. And I'll see you again next time in my next video about learning Japanese. So, domo arigatou gozaimasu. Sayonara. Goodbye.